Hello everyone and welcome to Season 6, Episode 42 of Pro Wrestling's Top 50. I'm your host Travis McNeil, and today we continue our countdown of the top 50 matches of 2021 with match number 9 on our list, which is the Revolution Pro Undisputed British Heavyweight title match between the champion Will Ospreay and the challenger Ricky Knight Jr. from the Revolution Pro High Stakes 2021 event held on September the 19th of 2021. This is one of the most compelling matches all year long for me. Will Ospreay, I've kind of done quite a few videos of matches of his during the last 10 or so videos that I've posted here. But this dude had some really high quality matches in 2021, as he has every year since he's really come up on the scene. But this match, it was incredible because it reminded me of the early Will Ospreay matches when Will Ospreay, was the young, kind of upstart, good high flyer, hard fighter, getting some notoriety and some popularity that gets to wrestle, one of his idols in AJ Styles. And that's a match that they did in RevPro. And here we are, 6-ish, I guess, years later. And the Will Ospreay is now on a completely different level. He is now in that AJ Styles role where he's wrestling someone like Ricky Knight Jr. that, over the past several years has, emulated Will Ospreay. And it's incredible for me to see, just how quickly roles can change in pro wrestling when opportunities are given and people seize them. And this match is really powerful, and I was just gripped by it the whole way through. It's a Will Ospreay match. Your mileage is going to vary. There's tons of big moves. There's tons of crazy sequences. There's tons of kickouts. There's tons of drama. There's all of those things which, some fans can take or leave. When used properly, I think they're great. I love exciting wrestling. I love wrestling that makes me care. And this match is a real roller coaster ride of different emotions with the story that they weave you through. So basically how we get here is RevPro kind of had a sneaky, underrated, good run during the pandemic. They were doing basically like their own studio show, the Epic Encounter series. Will Ospreay and Ricky Knight Jr. were kind of, building to a match through the first couple episodes of that. They had a match that Will Ospreay won. Will Ospreay would go on to win the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship in New Japan, and then he would suffer a neck injury. Also, rumors of some personal problems going on there too. And essentially, he would vacate the IWGP World Heavyweight title through, not him necessarily wanting to, but New Japan requiring that, and he would, stop appearing in RevPro. During that time, Ricky Knight Jr., was kind of thrust into being, Revolution Pro's main guy through that Epic Encounter series. He would win the Southside Wrestling heavyweight title. So Southside Wrestling was a retired promotion that was kind of absorbed into RevPro. He would basically defend that title as like the de facto Revolution Pro title, and it would lead to him actually trading that belt in and bringing back the old form RPW title, and he would declare himself as the Rev Pro British Heavyweight Champion. So kind of funny, it's something that we would end up seeing, in Ring of Honor, in late 2021, early 2022 with John Gresham and Bandito, where Bandito had the title that, he refused to turn over or didn't have the opportunity to turn over. So John Gresham would use the old kind of, style of title leading to their title versus title match. The same thing sort of happened in New Japan, ironically enough, with Will Ospreay, where he still had physical possession of the title that he vacated. That would lead, to him putting that belt up against, Okada's belt at Wrestle Kingdom. So that's basically what we get here. So this is kind of a weird, unofficial like title unification match, even though, Will Ospreay is the proper champion going into this one. Ricky Knight Jr. has a massive chip on his shoulder for this match. And it's funny because he is basically the babyface here, but Will Ospreay, popular wrestler, making his return. This is the first big, RPW, in-person big crowd during the pandemic. Their last big show before the pandemic hit, saw Will Ospreay overcome Zack Sabre Jr. to win the British heavyweight title. So, at the start of the pandemic, he was, this hero to them. And, now with the return to live action, he's coming in as this heel, but to a lot of the fan base, they still see him as this hero, right? He was the British star that broke out into New Japan first and put RPW on the map. So kind of an interesting take. And Ricky Knight Jr. is so young and so angst-filled and so angry at Will Ospreay, for what he feels is kind of like turning his back on RevPro. And that, he felt that the promotion rested on his young shoulders instead, and he had to carry it. That it leads to him kind of being the dickhead at the start of this match that you would expect Ospreay to do based on what we've seen out of him during his heel run in New Japan. So it's an interesting take because the story going into the match, they play something very different early on, and it almost creates this level of sympathy for Will Ospreay, where he's getting brutalized by this young dude that's treating him with a lot of disrespect. But then about partway through the match, they do this big shift, and it goes the other way, and they basically turn the full audience 100% onto Ricky Knight Jr.'s side. Same with me as the viewer, and it leads to, a very compelling, high drama conclusion to this match. And they, right during the intros, the referees got the belts, and Ricky Knight Jr. walks over, grabs both belts, and starts holding them up. He's just an arrogant little prick in this match, and that's again something that we see a lot out of Ospreay. They both charge at the bell. They do a really good job establishing this as this big time heated grudge match. Like I said, RKJ has the advantage all through the early going. He outquicks Ospreay, which is very hard to do. He outstrikes Ospreay, which again is very hard to do. Anytime Ospreay would try to get going, Ricky Knight Jr. would just ruin him with a chop. Ricky Knight Jr. would eye poke him. So again, kind of using these heelish tactics, but not even using them in a heelish way. Basically just, giving Will Ospreay the comeuppance for everything that he's done over the past year. This match definitely gets a little chippy. There's a point where Ricky Knight Jr. gets a near fall, and Ospreay just defiantly kicks out at one, not giving him the satisfaction of getting a near fall over, someone that Ospreay feels himself to be at a much higher level than Ricky Knight Jr. They really start to lean into Ospreay's bad neck injury, which again, sells some sympathy on him because Ricky Knight gets a DDT, a Hangman's DDT on the floor. He catches a springboard and hits a DVD into the corner and then lights him up with all of these flying drop kicks. There's a point where a table gets involved, and I've talked about, the Ospreay using the table throughout the Shingo matches. This one does have a bit of a similar feel to those Shingo matches, which were so great. They go tease this table being used, and Ospreay kind of bails, doesn't want to use the table, so Ricky Knight hits an over-the-post dive onto him, and really keeps that pressure going all throughout, the match. And this match is brutally stiff. Both guys get their faces bloodied up over the course of the match. They do big near falls, Canadian destroyers, everything you could possibly want. But where this match really kicks into overdrive is we get a ref bump. The referee gets kicked off the ring apron on an errant Will Ospreay kick and falls through the table that's out at ringside. And that's where, the high drama starts. And I talk so much about interference and overbooking and how it can be detrimental to matches. But when used properly, it can really accentuate a match too. And if it's warranted. And in this match, I certainly felt all of the shenanigans and the extracurriculars were warranted because it really, really got the crowd invested and therefore me as the viewer invested as well. Ricky Knight, does the Rainmaker pose, right? Because Ospreay's, mentor was Okada, someone that he, now has problems with. So again, just it's super, super arrogant. And Ricky Knight looks to have the match won. He hits the Rikishi driver, the Fire Thunder driver, which is his finisher. There's no referee there. When that happens, he decides that he's just going to, brutalize Ospreay and embarrass him more and go for the hidden blade himself. It leads to Ospreay, kind of rolling out of the way of that. Obviously, he knows the danger of that move. We got this big, tease of moves off the apron through the table. They tease the Rikishi driver, and it leads to Will Ospreay hitting this insane Oz cutter where he basically springs off the guardrail onto the ring apron and in one motion flies back to hit the Oz cutter. on Ricky Knight, who's like standing on this table, and the table just kind of shifts and doesn't completely break. It is brutal, and this just creates this like almost like this, mid-match turn where, you'd kind of sort of in a way been feeling sympathetic for Ospreay because Ricky Knight's been such a little shit, through this match. But here, Ospreay really turns the corner. We'd seen Ricky Knight get the visual pinfall over Ospreay, with the referee out. And now Ospreay just brutalizes him and makes him pay, starting with that Oz cutter through the table. He hits another one in the ring that only gets two. There's a moment where he locks Ricky Knight in the cheeky Nando's position and just unloads with repeated kicks and busts up his nose. He hits the assault driver from the second rope, and just a little thing that I loved, Ospreay's been using that move for the better part of 2 years now, and normally kind of like bumps down onto his butt when he does it, which is how that move goes. But here he just throws Ricky Knight and lands on his own feet, doesn't even take the bump off of it, which kind of has like this subtle like disrespect to it that I really, really liked. Ospreay goes for the hidden blade, and Ricky Knight just completely collapses. And Will is just such a prick, and he actually like pulls Ricky Knight off the mat by like grabbing his bloody nose that's been broken. He's wiping, the blood all over his own chest. And this is where the crowd, really starts to get behind Ricky Knight, who before they were a little bit torn on because, Ospreay's kind of their guy. But now Ospreay just out pricks him. He's so nasty. He's so dastardly that you want to see Ricky Knight, pull away and get this win. And Ospreay's just slapping him and forearming him. And Ricky Knight has like nothing left. He's collapsing. But he finally, slaps Ospreay back to show that he's still got some fight in him. And Ospreay, hits, all of the quad kicks that he does in the Shingo match. And then, Ricky Knight starts rolling with all of these counter near falls. He counters a powerbomb into like a great snap Rana. He counters like the rolling elbow that Ospreay had used in the Shingo matches into a backslide for two. He ducks the hidden blade. He absorbs, the rolling elbow and rebounds into a lariat. And he starts to kind of, fight back, and he's taking all of these brutal super kicks from Ospreay. And Ospreay tries to finish him with the double jump Oz cutter, but that gets countered into a top rope tiger suplex and the Rikishi driver. For the best near fall of the match, Ospreay gets his foot on the ropes, and at this point, you really know that you're seeing something special unfold as this wrestler that you're maybe, slightly unfamiliar with, or, that you've just started to see Ricky Knight, come out of his shell, step up to one of the best wrestlers in the world. And you can take that, and criticize that comment, but it's truly how I feel. I think Will Ospreay's an incredible pro wrestler. His own personality and stuff, separated from that. The dude is top notch in the ring and has some of my favorite matches in all of wrestling. So, Ricky Knight Jr. getting elevated to be on his level, just like Will Ospreay got elevated to be on the level of AJ Styles and Zack Sabre Jr. and Okada and Kushida and all of these guys that he got to work, when he was starting to break out. Ospreay, makes the mistake. He fires Ricky Knight Jr. up with just one too many slaps. And it leads to this excellent moment where Ricky Knight Jr. removes his wrist tape and basically says you want to fight, we're going to fight, and puts the hands up. He's he's from that Knight wrestling dynasty in Britain, with Saraya Knight and Paige and his brothers, the UK hooligans. So he's got that crazy street fighter appeal. He's this young kid that's just ready to scrap on the streets. And just like in the Shingo match, when Shingo fired up from those Kawada kicks at the New Japan Cup, Ospreay starts to look a little scared and almost what have I done? I've made a mistake here. And Ospreay, ends up spitting at him, and spit was something that was used in the build-up to this match. Ricky Knight Jr. spat on Ospreay. So, we get this exchange of them swapping, spit at each other, which is gross, but again, just adds to the story. Nasty shoot headbutts. RKJ ends up hitting his own Oz cutter and makes this pivotal mistake in the match that leads into the finish, where he lets his emotions get the best of him. And it's this great, cherry on this story of this kid coming in with this chip on his shoulder that, could have won the match and didn't. And then when he could possibly win the match again, he's so kind of fired up and on his own emotions and been driven to this point of rage that he actually picks Ospreay up, grabs Ospreay's elbow pad, puts it on, you know, teases that he's going to do the hidden blade himself. He ends up eating a sick knee. Ospreay hits the hidden blade to the face without the elbow pad, which, you know, Ricky Knight took off himself, and it's enough to keep him down for 3. And it's like, it's this heartbreak of a finish because Ospreay retains, and through the story of the match, they've built it in you wanting Ricky Knight Jr. to win. But again, the kid has nobody to blame but himself, and it shows that, you know, he was elevated through this match, but he's still not on Ospreay's level. He's still making those dumb mistakes, just like those young, dumb mistakes that Will Ospreay makes, you know, with some of his social media posts and comments and stuff like that. He's someone that has a lot of growing up to do, you know, through the story of this match. So does Ricky Knight, you know, through the story that they've told with their professional wrestling match. So I really liked it on a deep level. We get this like amazing post-match here too, that if you tie it all in, just sets the match even further over the top. After the match, Ospreay, because he's completely deplorable, he hits the hidden blade again. We get the save from Shota Umino from New Japan that had kind of being built up, you know, with this excursion he's had in RevPro. He gets beaten down by the Young Guns, who were associates with Will Ospreay. Aussie Open, the big, you know, babyface tag team in RevPro, they make the big save. But then it turns out that, you know, they're actually in cahoots with Ospreay, and they drop Shota Umino, they drop the Young Guns, they drop Ricky Knight Jr., they hit this big, you know, triple team Oz Cutter fidget spinner combo, and they're left standing tall as the United Empire, you know, is formed in Rev Pro Wrestling, and Aussie Open would be added to Will Ospreay's growing stable. Super hot angle to end the show that nobody saw coming, so a lot of buzz coming out of that. To cap off just an incredible thrill ride, long form story of a match. I can't wait for these guys to have a rematch again someday, which we know is coming in 2022. And we'll see if they can outdo the magic that they made on this night as Revolution Pro, who has, you know, often one of the best crowds in all of wrestling when they run Your Call there in England. You know, they return post-pandemic with a hot crowd. And, you know, we'll see if they can maintain it with the rematch, because the crowd was certainly excited to see this match. And you add, you know, another year of juice on there, I think the rematch will have an even better reaction. You can check this match out on RevPro's on-demand service. They have a great streaming service with, I believe, a free trial as well if you've never checked them out before. You can subscribe to my channel here on YouTube so that you never miss a video. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Wrestling50. And please join me again next time as we continue to count down Pro Wrestling's Top 50.